So welcome back, folks. Just about to let someone's called pigs in blankets. Just about to let pigs in blankets in. All right, great. So welcome to the Bluelight weekly workshop, police recruitment weekly workshop. Where the idea for this came from, I've been doing it for ages for other Facebook groups for clients, in particular for serving police officers, where I run a 2-hour workshop for them every Friday. To help them prepare for promotion and help them prepare for specialist interviews and things like that. And you're all members of the Facebook group, so I know questions fly around there all the time, and I try and answer them whenever I can. But it just struck me that there's so many questions being posed, and there's so much confusion out there about various aspects of the recruitment journey that I could just run one of these workshops once a week, and that could help so many of you get a better sense of direction and clear up the fog of confusion that exists around police recruitment. And in case any of you are thinking, who the hell is this guy to give me this sort of advice? If you've not come across me before, for the past quarter of a century, I've been coaching and supporting people in the police sector to succeed in their interviews, promotion interviews, specialist interviews. Retired from the police a decade ago, and for the past decade, I've been coaching and supporting people to succeed in the police recruitment process. So there's over 12,000 people in the police now as a result of my support over that decade. And that's a conservative number. Through webinars, through one-to-ones, through seminars that I used to run pre-COVID. So there's no question that I'm going to put this out there, that I don't think there's any question you could ask that I've not got an answer for, or that I could provide you with a sense of direction for. If anything does crop up and I just don't know, I'll tell you. But I've got so many good contacts within the police sector in all sorts of forces and all sorts of specialist areas that I'm sure I'll be able to find out. How's that sound to everyone? Give me a thumbs up. I'll do a lot of hand signals on my webinars. All right. I'm not going to do introductions or anything like that because that'll just take too much time. Like I said, it'd be great if we could see everyone. That'd be awesome. It'd be really, really good if we can see everyone, because we communicate better when we're face to face, don't we? And even though Zoom seems like an empty room, it's a lot better than trying to do something over audio only. So pigs in blankets, I think that's an awesome name. All right, so a couple of different ways I normally do this. One, I could just go around the whole Zoom room asking what people want to cover, but that takes time as well. So let's just throw it out there. Who's got the first question? Who's got the first conundrum? Who's got the first thing where they're thinking, I'm just not quite sure what to do? So who wants to go first? That looks like Jennifer's going to press the button. No.
I will.
No, go on. Is that you? Great.
Yeah, so I have my final interview next week, and I was just wondering how different that is compared to the interview that we do for the OAC.
Okay, good question, very good question. And if you don't mind me asking, which force is it for?
It's for Greater Manchester.
For GMP, all right. So very different to the online assessment centre. The online assessment centre, for those of you, I don't know if you did my course, Becky, but I provide a sort of, how-to guide with sample interview questions, because they tell you for the online assessment centre, these are the values and the competencies you're going to get assessed against. So if I know that it's integrity, public service, transparency, we take ownership, we're innovative and open-minded, which is what it is, because it tells you, then I know what the questions are going to be. I know what they're going to be, because the police, College of Policing, are so formulaic, so predictable, that I know what the questions are going to be. And all you've got to do is just tick boxes. Tick, 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 tick. It is really formulaic. My daughter is 13, she could pass it. With her life experience today, she could pass it. Because it's not about your values or motivation, it's about your ability to tick boxes. That's all it is. The big difference, and there's over 50 different versions of this. I'm just going to let Hack in. There's over 50 different versions of this, Becky, because there's over 50 different forces. They've all got their own unique ways of filtering the numbers down to manageable sort of numbers, except for a few forces at the moment that are just accepting online assessment centre on its own. But forces like GMP have always had some form of final interview, always. And they're all very, very different. But the one thing they have in common is that the person interviewing you will be a real serving police officer. Very rarely are you interviewed by two HR officers. Rare, rare, rare. Normally it's a police officer and someone from HR. Now what that means is that we've got to put a completely different mindset on. We've got to, and what I talk about to my clients on the interview course and on my webinars and one-to-ones and all the rest of it that I've been doing for years, is we've got to absolutely focus on being our authentic and emotional self, but in a structured and detailed way. So there's books out there that I know say things like, just use phrases from the competency framework. You will be interviewed probably by a serving inspector. I used to be one of those. I used to do the interviews. And if anyone came to the interview rattling off a load of buzzwords from the competency and values framework, I would have very little time for them because I know they're trying to BS me. I want to find out about the real you. I want to find out about how you did things, the problems you had, the challenges you had, how you felt, how you managed those emotions. I want the detail. I want it in a structured way. And I want to get a real good feel for who you are. The online assessment centre does not do that because it's formulaic, tick box, and you're being assessed remotely a couple of days later by a College of Policing assessor who probably hasn't ever had a warrant card in their pocket. You know, it's common for those assessors just to have never been police officers. They're just associates for the College of Policing. They don't even know what force you're applying to, so they don't really care. That's the difference, though. That's the difference, Becky. You're going to be interviewed by someone who is operational, short shrift for any kind of competency BS, wants to hear about the real you, the authentic you, but in a very structured and detailed way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Now, is that making you look forward to the interview more or not?
No, like I am looking forward to it, to be fair. I think I'll be all right. I hope I'll be all right. But
there's what might help you as well is there's a YouTube video I did several months ago. I don't know if Becky's still with us. She looks like she might have frozen. We should be able to hear this, I hope. But there's a YouTube video I did several months ago called The Toughest Questions. Becky, you froze just then. I was just saying that I did a YouTube video several months ago called The Toughest Questions. If you dig it out, that was the questions on there were the questions that GMP asked back then. So they might have changed the questions, but they'll be of that ilk. And the other thing they do is they give you the questions and then 10 minutes to make some rough notes and to have a think about the questions before they interview you. So I think that's quite good practice, actually, you know, to get the very best from you. So you're not just sort of plucking some nonsense out the annals of your life. So I think it's a reasonably challenging interview, but the questions are tough. They are tough questions. They're not going to ask you why you want to be a police officer because you've already had that one in your application form, where you had to do a 500-word essay, didn't you, on why you wanted to be a police officer. Yeah, so they're not going to ask you that one. They won't ask you that one.
Okay.
There you go. Stick to and try and steer clear of that star nonsense as well. I know all the books seem to love star, but no one actually talks like that. No one ever says, so the task is, the task I set myself. No one talks like that. So what I advocate is something I've come up over the past several years, which is SAL, which still talks about the situation, but bring some detail into it. Talk about the impact of the problem or challenge on others, on you, on the team, and then move from that into the aim as opposed to task. So talk about what I was aiming to achieve, because that sounds a little bit more realistic. And when you talk about what you aim to achieve, you can then talk about the options you considered. Then talk about what you did, but not just what you did, but how you did it. So don't say something like, I sat next to the person and listened to them in an empathetic way without describing how you did empathetic. Someone did a brilliant example of that earlier on today when I was doing some one-to-one coaching. They talked about how they spoke to these individuals in a calm manner and reassured them. And so I said, well, how did you do that? And he said, well, I went from an authoritative to a compassionate and understandable way of talking to them. Great. How did you do compassionate? How did you do understandable? And it took about 3 or 4 more times of me saying, how did you do that? Before he actually got to the detail, which is what would score him points on the interview. All right, thank you, Becky. Over to the next person who's got a question. Who else has got questions? Conundrums, anything at all about the police recruitment process? Got iPhone who's on the bus, hopefully.
Hello, Brendan. Hello,
Hi.
nice to meet you again.
Yeah,
I
I'm doing very
recently
well.
attended, thank you. I recently completed your online assessment course, and I've communicated with you tonight on Facebook about purchasing the stage 3 assessment, briefing assessment on the 8th of December. Thank you. Yep. Just a question, going forward, will your stage 3 assessments include covering the noisy party scenario to help us?
Yes, and so the online assessment centre, for those of you who don't know, has changed. The College of Policing have been running it for about 18 months, and they've changed the stage 3 briefing. It used to be about sort of drug dealers, homeless people who are taking drugs, who are vulnerable, a community that's pissed off about everything that the police aren't doing. And you'd be expected to talk for a total of 36 minutes through 12 questions that they'd ask you. They might have had some feedback about that, because in the College of Policing guidance, it says that you don't need to have any experience or knowledge of policing to be able to do the stage 3. And then they put you in a position of tackling organised criminality and drug dealers and all of that kind of palaver. So they've now changed it to a noisy party. And so what I've started to do is load the client-only group, the client-only Facebook group, up with a series of videos, explainer videos, on how to tackle various questions that they're going to ask you, and how I predict that that noisy party scenario will develop. So I think the way it's going to develop is you're going to have a noisy party that you're presented with. There are going to be young people there, probably underage. And then it's going to develop into an out of control noisy party, where there's lots of people attending with alcohol, and you might be wanting to think about dispersal powers. And then from an ethical source, it's going to develop into something completely ridiculous with people who've been assaulted, maybe sexually, at the party, and individuals who are being encouraged to attack the police via social media. It's totally ridiculous that you should be expected to know how to deal with that. But they're going to ask you questions on how you go about tackling that. So I've already given you a sample exercise in the client-only group. It's a PDF. And like I said, I've started uploading all sorts of guides. There's one behind you there. That was the subject of one of the videos. Ooh, there it is. The other day, and I've been putting some stuff on YouTube as well. But that one is about the resources that you'd utilize, the sort of resources bank that you'd utilize for the stage 3, not just the briefing, but also for the written. So don't be thinking that a noisy party is just the domain of the police. There's several other agencies that you can get involved that might actually have a presence at sort of 10, 11 o'clock at night. So it's all going to be there in the clients only group, and the webinars have now changed for it. And I know you're going to attend next Wednesday, aren't you? We've already sorted it out to attend next Wednesday. So hopefully that answers the question for you, my friend iPhone. I know your real name. So.
Just one more response. Thank you very much for doing that and for continually updating the sources. Yeah, just a question. Would you be able to forward to me before the session the scenario, paper-based scenario regarding the noisy party, the questions and stuff?
Just go to the client-only group, the Bluelight client-only group. It's on a PDF.
Oh, thanks.
Oh,
right, you had. Oh,
yeah.
brilliant.
So
okay,
just
thank you.
scroll through my posts, I posted it as a PDF about, I think it was about 4 days ago, something like that. And once
Brilliant.
I'm happy with all the explainer videos, they will all get uploaded to the online course. But I've already been told by people who've done the online assessment centre over the past few days that what I've posted there has just been 100%. So you'll be fine. You'll be in good hands there. Awesome stuff. Over to Emma, who has a question, I hope.
Hello. So this is kind of a follow-on from the noisy party scenario, and talking about different powers and things that the police have. Is it going to be kind of set in a specific point in time with regard to sort of COVID restrictions and mixing of household regulations and things like that? Or is it kind of more like pretend that's not happening and assume it's kind of a normal time?
What's a normal time at the moment?
Well, exactly.
What is a normal time? So I'm watching the participants screen as well, just to see who's there. So I'm just letting Inez in. Hopefully I pronounced it right. Ethically, I've seen some of the sample exercises that they put in front of police officers before they decided to use the noisy party scenario. Not one of those exercises mentions COVID. The information you get is very vague. It will be, the first scenario will be just something like, you're on patrol, it's 10 o'clock at night, and you're on foot patrol in a busy housing estate, something like that. A member of the community approaches you and says they want to make a complaint about a noisy party, or you might get sent to the incident. And you go to the address and see that there's several young people in there who appear to be under 18, who appear to be drinking alcohol, and yes, it is noisy. And that'd be it. That'd be it. It'll ask you then all sorts of questions like, what considerations would you give to this incident? What would your initial actions be? What would your next step be? And you've got to talk for 3 minutes about those things. Okay. So as it develops, if it develops into, it's getting out of control and there's too many people attending, then, there's various tools and powers you can utilize. Why you'd be expected to know them at all, I don't know. And why they're giving you a noisy party, I don't know. Because the response from most police forces to someone ringing to say there's a noisy party would be, you've rung the wrong agency. You need to contact environmental services because they've got a responsibility to deal with statutory noise nuisance. And it doesn't become statutory noise nuisance until after 11 o'clock. It's only statutory noise nuisance between 11 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning in terms of things like parties. And it's got to be something that's not just a one-off, it's got to be persistent for it to be statutory noise nuisance. So the police have absolutely no powers whatsoever other than, could you please turn the music down? If I knocked on someone's door and said, could you please turn the music down, it's disturbing neighbours, they'd be quite within their rights to say, no, F off, and slam the door in my face. And there's absolutely nothing I could do. So I don't know I don't know what's going through their heads. I suspect, talking to some of my sources in forces who have been briefed up by this on the various options that were being considered for the new stage 3 briefing, that none of the people who came up with the actual scenarios have ever been in a police station before in their lives. Honestly, seriously. In one of the sample exercises, it was going to be a festival that got out of control. That's a major public order incident that would not be dealt with by a young constable. It'd be dealt with by someone of the rank of inspector at the very least. But in it, they talked about the inspector got in touch with the public order command unit, who sent riot vans and dogs and dog vans to the scene. Riot van? There's no such thing as a riot van. What on earth is a riot van? It's like something from the 1970s. There's no such thing as a riot van. if the police use the phrase riot vans, then that's presuming that they're going to cause or deal with a riot. So it's very presumptuous and it's very stereotypical. And another scenario that we're considering was, so I know I'm going off at tangent here, but I'm on my soapbox now. You got me on my soapbox. Another scenario was going to be a community that's mostly ethnic that was failing to report crime, but they were also considering vigilante action to deal with the criminals. What a stereotype that is. Our stereotype is that people who are black or ethnic don't report crime and are willing to carry out crimes against other people in terms of vigilante action. So I'm sorry, College of Policing, but you got me on my soapbox again. So anyway, to answer your question, Emma, no mention of COVID. It's just very, very basic information they're going to give you. Then they're going to expect you to talk about for about 36 minutes, not about, but for 36 minutes in total. That's 12 3-minute answers. And what you've got to get good at is just filling those 3 minutes. And a lot of it will be about how to deal with the perpetrators, how to deal with members of the community who are upset, how to deal with individuals who are causing problems, public order or otherwise. And that's when you do need to have some knowledge of tools and powers, things like dispersal powers. Section 50 of the Police Reform Act 2002, powers to require name and address, powers to seize alcohol, powers around things like police protection orders, your powers, just for example, under a dispersal powers, if you reasonably believe that someone's under 16, you can take them to a place of safety or their home address. How you'd be expected to know all of that, I don't know. A lot of police officers can't explain dispersal powers properly because they're quite complex. You know, a lot of my officers in the past would direct people to leave, because it used to be called direction to leave. They'd direct people to leave for up to 48 hours. One of the questions I'd ask them is, you've directed them to leave because of a party for 48 hours, so they can't come back into this area for 48 hours. Is that proportionate? Because you just wanted to get them to leave a party. You know, what happens if they're walking a dog the next day in that area? They're committing an offence because they've come back into an area you required them to leave from for a period of up to 48 hours. So there's all sorts of things like necessity, proportionality, having a rationale for all your actions, working out words like believe and suspect. There's a lot involved, and that's why I think the College of Policing, I don't know, they need to get out more. They need to actually speak to more serving police officers. Anyway, Emma, I probably answered several questions there. Did that answer several questions for you? Awesome stuff, thank you. Grace has got a question. We're halfway through now, by the way, halfway through. It'd be great for some of those of you who've joined us if we could actually see you, but if I understand if you're at work or something like that, that might be difficult. Grace, fire away.
Hiya, so I think you saw it on the group, but I posted earlier because I've been seeing a lot of people during the application saying stuff about like their mental health or like medication that they were on. And I just don't know like what sort of the rules are with that. So I just wanted to know really if you could clear that up.
Yeah, really good question, that. And, you know, there's so many people who have in the past or are taking some form of medication for some kind of anxiety or mental health condition. I've taken medication in the past for, you know, to help me with my mental health, to support me through some difficult times. So it's completely usual in our society to be supported by some medication. The College of Policing guidance, or I think it's actually National Police Chief's guidance, forgive me if I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but what it says is that you should be off medication for a period of 1 year. Now, that's not the law, so forces can interpret that however they want, because it doesn't say off medication for more than a year when you apply. And it doesn't say off medication for more than a year on your start date. It just says off medication for more than a year. And I think most forces take that as meaning when it gets to your medical, when you have your medical. Now, this is where things get a bit fuzzy, because you'd think, right, any medication for any kind of anxiety or mental health or anything that has comes under that bracket would stop you actually joining, and you'd get your application postponed because it says 1 year. But that's not the case, because I've supported and helped so many people over the years who managed to bypass that. And the way they've bypassed it is when, you know, if their doctor says that actually the primary purpose behind them having this medication was for something, and it wasn't a mental health problem, then suddenly you're outside of that umbrella, even though that medication might be primarily used for anxiety. So I'll give you an example. I can't remember the name of the medication, but I had a back problem recently. I've still got a back problem a little bit. My arm still feels it a bit because it's, I think I call it referred pain. So the pain isn't actually in my back, it's in my arm, which is a bit weird. And some of the medication I had to help me sleep at night was medication that's normally prescribed for anxiety, depression. But for me, it was prescribed to be combined with the dihydrocodone, very strong doses of dihydrocodone to get rid of the pain. So I know in the past that's a blurred line, isn't it? So I've been on some medication which is normally used for anxiety, but that wasn't the reason why it was prescribed. So that's a blurry line. The other thing that's a blurry line is that forces can go, all right, 6 months then, because it's only a low dose. Or it's only a low dose, so we're not going to give you any time at all. We understand why you might be taking it, because it could have been that you had a death in the family 4 months ago and it was really difficult for you. So your doctor prescribed some really low dose medication for you, and that's fine. So the 1 year rule, we're not even interested. One of my clients, I'm not going to say which force she's in, but she was on some medication for depression, and her doctor wrote a note to say that she's gradually coming off it. It's being monitored. It's being supported by me. I anticipate in the next year, within 9 to 12 months, she'll be off the medication. If she comes off it now so she can get into the police, it will cause her more harm than good. It's being managed. She's doing really well. This was the reason why she was prescribed it, and I see no reason why she shouldn't be able to join the police. And that particular force said, yeah, that sounds reasonable, and they let her in. So there you go, Grace. Does that help answer, or does it help muddy the waters even more for you?
No, that's really helpful. So it's almost like a basic rule that they say, but they're very lenient. I guess they just want to know more and just talk about it a bit and then see what's going on from there.
Yeah, or they could be very dogmatic about the rule and just say, no, it says a year, and you've got to be off it for a year because that's what the rules say. It's a bit like some forces are more accepting of people as individuals, and others are a little bit more computer says no.
Yeah, I would say as well, do you reckon that, say, obviously for us, they're asking us for like a medical and we have to sort of say, but then say if we get in and then later down the line, like you get put on medication or whatever, is that going to be traced, or is that sort of just now it's gone and they wouldn't really know about that, or they wouldn't care about that?
If you go repeat that again, Grace, I missed part of it. So you have to go and start again.
So say like now we're talking about in our application, but then later down the line, say that we then get put on medication, would they know, like, do we have to do medical every year once we get in, or is it a thing once we've done it, we've done it?
Yeah, once you've done it and you're in. Although
Right.
for certain positions you might have to have a medical. So I think for things like underwater search unit, I think for firearms you might have to have medical as well. It's not an automatic thing that you have to have a medical every year, or you just have to do the fitness test. So you've got to do the bleak test and pass that every year. But you don't necessarily have to have a medical every year. The one time you might have to have a medical again is if you pull yourself out of the pension scheme. So if you withdraw from the pension scheme, if you want to go back into it, it's highly likely they will make you do a medical. And if there's any conditions that have happened since you joined and the medical that would prevent you from getting the same pension benefits, so that you would have failed your medical if you're applying first time round, then you might not be able to join the pension system. So this is one of the reasons why I advocate, and I'm going off at a tangent, I always do this. Those who know me know I go off all sorts of tangents, but this is why I advocate that you, once you're in and you enroll in the pension scheme, stay in it, even if it means beans on toast for a year. I suppose I'm exaggerating a bit, but the pension scheme is awesome. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's still awesome. And in your early years is the time to start, make sure you're paying into it. So hopefully that answers your question, Grace. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, just one more thing. So obviously, so you answered my question, like, after we've done it, like, the only other reasons are for specific things that we'd need to do a medical again. So do you think that the forces that are quite hot on the 1 year, and they don't go into like personal reasons, they just say 1 year and that's it, and you're not allowed in, if you then began to take medication, so like something happened in your life, like you said, like bereavement or something, and you had to go on medication, what would happen then? Because you're already in it and now you're on these antidepressants while you're in the police. Like, what's the situation with that?
So if you have your medical and then you're waiting to join the police and something happens and you start taking medication, that'd be a material change in your application, and you'd be expected to update the police about this change in circumstances. Once you're in the police, if you're on medication, that's your business. That's your business.
Right.
Between you and your medical practitioner. Although you've got a responsibility to the service to declare anything that would make you medically or mentally unfit to be able to carry out your role. So I can give you an example of that from years ago. When I was a fairly newly promoted sergeant, one of my officers, I'd noticed that he wasn't himself. He seemed to be struggling. He was grumpy all the time. Something was going on, and I kept sitting down with him saying, I won't say his first name, but let's call him John. It wasn't his first name. John, what's going on? How is everything at the moment? Oh, it's fine, Sarge. And he would soldier away, and I kept thinking, there's something not right. And one night I came in and I went into the night kitchen at about 4 a.m, and he was there with his head in his hands in the night kitchen. And he's meant to be out on patrol, and I just went, John, just tell me, what is it? And he just got a sick note out that had been given the week before by his doctor, who'd signed him off for anxiety and depression for a period of 4 weeks with medication. And at that point, I just said, you shouldn't even be here. You shouldn't be here. We can help support you, but you've been signed off. You're unfit for duty. This doctor's saying you're unfit for duty, and you're saying, I'm staying at work. I'm not going home. I'm staying at work. And I had to give him a direct order to say, go home. I am now booking you off duty. You go home. And he didn't have to declare what medication he was on, but he did have a responsibility to declare he was unfit for duty. He didn't get stuck on for it or anything. We supported him, helped him. We got him the counselling he needed. We got him support through the Police Federation. We helped bring him back gradually into sort of a phased working program. So we just came in for 1 morning a week, and then we built it up and built it up and built it up. 6 months later, he was a happy chappy again. So it's I suppose, to answer your question, Grace, once you're in, you've got a responsibility to declare whether you are unfit for duty or not. And if you don't, then you can get yourself in the mire a little bit. You can get yourself in the mire. And plus, things like insurance and all sorts of other stuff might not cover you. You might be on medication that says, do not drive. And then you go out and drive in a patrol car and have a crash. You're in a sticky position there. You're in a sticky position. Does that help answer your question, Grace?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Awesome. You're welcome. Over to Charlie, who's got his hand up there.
Hi, so basically it is on, it's on Grace's question. What is the actual process during the medical?
Well, I'm not a medical practitioner, so I can't say what the whole process is, but you will be asked to complete a form which asks you all about any medical conditions that you have, or pre-existing conditions, anything that you've got at the moment. and there'll be a load of questions. I've not done a medical for years, but I know that that's what it is. And then you will go for a medical where they will medically examine you. If you do not declare something and you're aware that you've got it, and they later find out that you didn't declare it, you knew you had it, but you didn't declare it on your form, you're out of a job. You're gone. You're gone. So the medical is quite fairly stringent because they're looking for a raft of different conditions. The Metropolitan Police have a quite useful document, really. One is called Fit for the Job, and another one describes all the pre-existing medical conditions that would preclude you from getting in or would warrant further investigation. So it's not to say that you can't get in with certain pre-existing medical conditions, but it's to say that it would require further investigation. So there's a lot of conditions there, and I'm not going to give any advice or guidance about it because I'm not a medical practitioner, not qualified to do so. So hopefully that answers your question, Charlie.
Yeah, that does. Cheers.
Awesome, great stuff. Andy's got a question.
How you doing? I've just got a couple of questions about the online assessment centre.
Yep.
I'm going for it very, very soon. A bit of background, I'm a serving special constable in Northamptonshire Police.
Mm-hmm.
Can I use examples from when I've been on shift as examples for the interview? And also things that are not, like just general examples, not police related. How do I actually relate them to the police? Because you said that we need to do it.
Right, in your interview for the online assessment centre, one of the things I've noticed with special constables, PCSOs, prison officers, detention officers, people who have been in the military, is they tend to give answers that kind of reflect what they think the police are looking for.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example of that. Would be a time when I had to make a difficult decision. You know, should I arrest the person or not? Should I use my powers of entry or not? Should I do the first aid? First aid is one that crops up all the time for public service and difficult decisions. Should I do first aid or not? Whereas the bottom line is when you look at the behaviours. So if I just dig out. If I dig out public service as an example, people often use things like, you know, I did great first aid, or someone tried the other day on a webinar to say that, you know, I saved someone's life who had collapsed into a swimming pool, and I was a lifeguard at the time. But when you look at the behaviours, you've got things like, this is just my translation of the behaviours from the actual value in the competency and values framework. How did you go about understanding the needs of others to deliver a service? Think about the open questions you used, a range of cathartic and catalytic questions. How did you go about ensuring you listened to the concerns of others? What consideration did you give to how others would want to be treated? How did you find this out? How did you go about including others in the delivery of this service? How did you ensure that what you did was in the interest of the organisation you were part of? And the question won't necessarily be, can you tell me about a time when you've delivered the best possible service? It could be, can you tell me about a time when you've delivered a service by tailoring your communication style to meet the needs of others? Which is a very, very popular question in the police. So things that have that immediacy that come from police as a special PCSO, you know, I dealt with a road traffic collision, I used my powers of entry, decided whether I should arrest them or not, or I saved someone's life, or as a prison officer and I did something, some door entry because someone was behind, cell door entry, someone was behind the door that was agitated and wanted to kick off. Or an awesome story once was, wasn't a story, it was the truth, from someone in the parachute regiment. There was a corporal who gave an account of how they came under attack when he was doing a VIP escort in Afghanistan. And he managed to get everyone back to base safely. And all of those would score poorly. And the reason why they'd score poorly is because they don't have the people element. They don't have all of that asking questions, getting support, listening carefully to what other people say. They don't have all of that people element. And so because of that, because it didn't have all of that people element, what tends to happen is they score poorly. They score poorly. And things like using my powers of entry, should I arrest this person or not? How you dealt with a road traffic collision. Quite honestly, you know, you're just doing your job. It's not a difficult decision whether to use powers of entry or not. The law tells you whether you can or you can't. The law tells you, he tells you whether you can arrest someone or whether you can't. They're not difficult decisions. They're just decisions.
Okay.
So the paratrooper actually used an example of one of his soldiers who he was supervising, who his sergeant wanted out of the regiment. And he said, no, there's something, the difficult decision was he went against the decision of his sergeant and his commanding officer by making a representation to them that actually there's more to this, and we should give this individual a second chance. And that was a really difficult decision for him to sort of go against the command structure and push upstream a little bit. And he used that at his final interview and scored awesomely. Whereas the paratrooper one, you know, tea and medals next day, full of awesome excitement and explosions and people being shot at and stuff like that, but would get the tea and medals, but wouldn't hit the behaviours that you need to demonstrate. So the online assessment centre, I think, is far more formulaic. It's a bit more tick box. So you might get through with some examples from Special Constabulary world, but you've got to be careful to make sure they actually hit the behaviours, because that's the behaviours of the marking guide. They can't use anything else as a marking guide, just the behaviours. So that's what you've got to be careful of. That's what you've got to be careful of. When it comes to final interview, because I've done those final interviews, and I know people who've been to final interviews have used examples from their Special Constabulary world, PCSO world, DDO world, detention officer, whatever it might be, comms. Quite frankly, the interviewers just listen to it and just go, well, do you want a medal? You know, just, he did his job. So
okay.
Because there's no so what. It's like, yes, we arrested him. So what?
Right.
So you got a pat on the back for doing a good job. Yeah, but so what? What about the behaviours? What? And again, people struggle with that. So in that respect, I think being a PCSO or special can be to the detriment of your application. I know a special sergeant from Cheshire who she applied twice to Cheshire. Her application form got knocked back both times because all her examples were Special Constabulary world. And the third time she applied, I said, right, on your application form, I don't want to see any examples of police world. It's all got to come from your personal life or your other work or hobbies or sports or anything like that. So she used all of those and flew through. And for all her interviews, she didn't say anything about her police involvement. All her examples came from outside of Special Constabulary. She flew through, got through everything, scored really well on both the assessment centre and the interview, and she got in.
Okay.
So does that help balance things out, Andy?
Yeah, so I mean, I was only going to use one policing example because the example I was going to use was the one that you've just said about best possible service. So, for instance, my example is we had 2 refugees who didn't speak a word of English, so we used a translator. So that was going to be one of my examples. So
I'm not sure if that would work, and the reason is because you didn't have to change the style of your communication to meet the needs of another.
Okay.
Someone else did.
Right.
And it's also got that so what. So if you came in to see me, so I used to be one of these, so I know what inspectors are like. So if you came to me, or even as a sergeant, you came to me and said, I've just dealt with 2 refugees and I think I did a really awesome job because I used the translation services. I'd look at you and just go, why are you telling me this?
Okay.
Why do you think I'm remotely interested? I wouldn't say that, but I'd be thinking that because it's just like, so what? Big deal. You use the translation services.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't do it for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas, if that service wasn't available and you had to try and find a way of communicating with them, then that might work better. But still, there's a problem because you can't find out from them how they would like to be treated or what their needs are because there's a language barrier.
Yeah.
Works better when you're dealing with vulnerable people who might have a pre-existing or existing mental health problem.
Right. Okay,
So that's where you've got to really change the style of your communication to meet the needs of other people.
okay.
Whereas people who don't speak the same language as you can't even change the style of your communication because you don't understand each other, and you end up just using language line. And
Yes.
yeah, so what? Big deal. Yeah. So I'd have a rethink on that, Andy.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much for that. And how do I relate sort of my other like personal life scenarios to policing? Because you said we need to do that.
You don't need to. You don't have to. I just think it's the icing on the cake. So at the end of it, when you've talked about the situation, your aim, your actions, what the result was, what you learned from this. So the example from earlier on today, the one-to-one, the learning was that I listened to this angry person and eventually worked out what they were angry about. And then I went in to then ask them what they wanted me to do about it. The learning was that he didn't demonstrate to the other person that he'd listened carefully to what they were saying by paraphrasing it back.
Okay.
So that's when you get to the learning. Often when people talk about learning, they say things like, and so what I learned from this is it's good to ask open questions, or what I learned from this is it's good to be a good communicator. You know, just really bland phrases that aren't proper learning. Whereas he was talking about proper learning. So this is when you then move into knowledge and understanding, which is where you'd say, so the reason why listening carefully to people is that if you don't understand what people's needs are, you might provide in the police service a service that is not tailored to their individual needs. And this all links in with equality, diversity, equality and inclusion, but especially equality, because a lot of people think equality is about treating people the same. And it's not. It's not about treating people equally. It's about treating people according to their unique needs. And that's why it's essential to ask lots of questions, but to listen really carefully and check with the other person to ensure that they are saying, yes, you have listened correctly, and they know you've listened because you're paraphrasing things back to them. And that's a really important skill for police officers to have. And that's one I'd hope to exhibit when I achieve my goal of becoming a police officer. So that's how you wrap the knowledge and understanding at the end. And that's why I call it the Solid model. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much for that.
Good stuff. All right, there you go, Andy. There you go. Okay. Who else has got some questions in? Who else is in there? The Zoom room that's got some questions or conundrums. And if anyone's thinking, I don't want to ask this because people are going to think I'm a bit silly. No, they're not. Actually, I'm just thinking about someone might have, I'm just looking at the notes. Oh, I've got one here from someone. If you could give any piece of advice for the Inforce interview, what would it be? Oh my goodness. How many hours? How many hours do you want me to spend? I spent hours on this, so prepare for, okay, pieces of advice for the Inforce interview. Prepare for multiple types of questions. So don't think or presume that just because the questions, like I talked about before, GMP's 6 toughest questions. The YouTube video, by the way, won't say GMP. It'll just say these are 6 of the toughest questions. But they are, I can tell you now, they're from Greater Manchester Police. Don't think that the questions that were asked then are going to be the questions that get asked now. Because today, at this moment in time, there could be a new chief inspector in GMP in charge of recruitment who just goes, oh, I don't like those questions. I think the questions should be this, that, and the other. And it just changes overnight like that. Boom. Changes overnight. And forces do change the style of their interview on a regular basis. So this is why I try and prepare people for everything, for what your motivation is, why you want to be a police officer, and why you want to be a police officer is not, I just want to help the community, I want to give something back, no 2 days are the same, I'm a helpful sort of person, I love to support people, I love to help people, I'm very compassionate, and all of those cliches, because everyone says that. And if everyone says that, it doesn't set you apart. Questions about your values. What one value would you say you stand for the most? And then the next question from that would be, give me an example of a time when you've demonstrated that value. What skills or values can you offer this force? And then followed by, how would you anticipate that those skills and values would help us meet the current challenges? That's a Nottinghamshire Constabulary question. What are the current challenges? Tell us what the current challenges are to the police service today. Don't say austerity, do not say staffing. Your answers need to be far more complex than that. And then we've got our competency-based questions. Can you tell me about a time when? And then we've got our forward-facing questions. This is a scenario, how would you deal with it? And then we've got questions about what you believe the challenges will be to you as you balance your personal life with being a police officer. Questions like that, especially asked of forces when you're going to be doing the PCDA. So I know Cheshire actually have someone from the university on their interview board, and they will ask you questions about how you're going to manage that balance between work, study, and home life. Questions about what sort of things do you think you'll be doing in your role as a police officer? We want to make sure that you understand the reality of policing. And then what sort of impact is being a police officer going to have in your personal life? And the answer is not, I think I'm prepared for it, I don't think it will have any impact. I've worked shifts before, is the incorrect answer. It's going to have a massive impact on your life. It's going to have a huge impact on your personal life, especially in respect of your mental well-being. And another question that often gets asked is how you're going to manage the challenges of your mental well-being as a police officer. So there's a lot there. And then you might also just get a force that just asks you 6 competency questions, and that's it. So it can be fair, it can be any of those. And so I suppose the biggest tip, biggest advice I would give is be prepared for anything. Be prepared for all of those. And if you're prepared for all of those, then you're going to be able to manage. And you should, the other big tip I'd give is prepare and practice so that on the day you don't sound rehearsed. I know people who've been failed where they've said that your content was really good, but you sounded rehearsed. And they've been failed for being rehearsed. Gloucestershire failed one of my clients last year for that because he sounded rehearsed. They just didn't like it. Remember this document here. Who's familiar with this? The Wheel of Confusion. From the Competence and Values Framework. Yeah, some of you got it in front of you. Lewis has got one, but in colour. That's my black and white version. The assessors at the final interview understand that just as much as you do. Just as much as you do. I've seen some of the feedback for potential recruits. I've seen feedback for PC to sergeant. I've seen feedback from sergeant to inspector. And the feedback often bears no resemblance to the actual behavioural indicators and the values and the competencies. Because one of the big questions they're going to be asking as well is, can I see this person on my team? Can I see this person in this constabulary? And they'll have probably made their minds up in the first minute, 2 minutes of the interview. I remember one guy once, I'd made up my mind as he walked through the door. He had half his shirt hanging out. He'd not shaved that morning. He'd not put polish on his shoes, ever. His trousers had never seen an iron. His top button was undone. He had a tie on, but his top button was undone. And he did that as he walked in the door. Oh, sorry, I got a bit of a cold. And then he went to shake my hand. And I just thought, by the time he got to a point where he was shaking my hand, I just went, I don't think so. What I really meant was, I don't think you're ever going to get into the police. Because quite clearly he didn't really give a shit. And I was really angry, actually. How dare you waste my time? How dare you come to this interview looking like that? So I think that's the other advice I'd give is, bear in mind that a lot of the people who are interviewing you, they come from a disciplined, uniformed service, and they expect a certain level of presentation and a certain level of respect for the organisation that you're going into. So I sometimes see comments in the Facebook group, you know, what should I wear? Would I be okay wearing jeans? No, no. Should I get a haircut before I go for an interview? If you're a man, yes. Do I need to have a shave? Well, I wouldn't turn up for an interview looking like me. You know, from female and male candidates. My hair's dyed at the moment. I'm thinking of dyeing it again. No, just no. Don't go. What they meant was multicolored, so like one half pink and the other half orange or something. No, just no. Same with big makeup as well. you know, don't do big makeup, whatever sex you are. Just bear that in mind. And I know some of you might be thinking, it's a modern police service, there should be this, should be the other. Yeah, well, you're dealing with people, and they have stereotypes, and I'm sorry, but you're not going to get around that unconscious bias unless you try hard, a little bit hard to, it's not about fitting in or conforming, it's just knowing that you're being respectful of the fact that you're going for an interview in the police. So dress the part, be the part, and show a level of respect. Do not walk in and go, how you doing, mate? There's nothing that winds police officers up more than being called mate. So don't call them mate. All right, so it sounds like a dad talk that now, doesn't it? So my apologies to the person who asked the question. Hopefully that's helpful. It wasn't meant to be a dad talk, but anyway. Emma's got a hand up, so is Emily. So I'm going to give Emily the opportunity to ask a question. Emily, fire away.
Hi, yeah, that was me who asked that question, and you have really cleared up kind of the area, and it wasn't a dad talk. I think everyone really needs to know that. But I have my in-force interview tomorrow with Northampton Police, so I was just kind of making sure that, you know, I've kind of got the areas covered, and, you know, I'm not going to kind of go off on a tangent and go, because I've got to do like a presentation kind of briefing exercise, so I didn't want to make it too I don't know how to explain it. I didn't want to make it too like rehearsed. I really wanted it to be like quite natural, the things I was trying to say, because I think it's so noticeable when you can kind of, you're listing things off and you've got this, you're going about 100 miles an hour with what you want to say. So I just needed a bit of advice, that was all. So
what's the presentation subject? Have you been given it?
Yeah, it's what do you understand the role of a police officer to be within Northamptonshire Police? So it's more of a question kind of briefing than anything.
So is that it? Just that one question? What do you understand?
Yeah.
10 minutes? Have they given you for it?
5.
5 minutes. Yeah, that's not a presentation. That's an interview question.
Yeah, that's what I've said. I'm going to kind of take it from as a question, because I'm going to kind of go off if I'm talking as a police officer within Northamptonshire Police. So that's how I'm going to kind of start it.
Yeah, great. That'll work well. That's just an interview question. It often freaks people out when they say you're going to have to do a presentation, and the questions are. So Nottinghamshire Police, it's I think it's they ask, why do you want to be a police officer in Nottinghamshire? What are the big challenges, and how are you going to help us meet those challenges? That's just 3 interview questions wrapped up as one. So you've got 10 minutes to answer 3 interview questions. So people often get a bit hot and bothered under the collar and start preparing big PowerPoint presentations and things like that. And just no. How many of you have ever been excited by a PowerPoint presentation?
No.
Yeah, none of you put your hand up. So don't do one to them. Police officers hate PowerPoint. They hate anything like that. So don't subject them to it. Speak from the heart. Speak from the heart. Talk about some of the things that you expect to be doing, especially around vulnerability and supporting people and giving 120% without being asked to do so. And they need to get a real feel. I know Northampton, I believe Northampton have even been the CVF. They don't even mark you against this now.
Yeah. Am I right to kind of go over the points of what I think I'm going to cover, just to see if I'm kind of doing the right thing?
We're over an hour here, but I don't mind. So I don't know, what's everyone else think? Give me, let's put it to a vote. Give me a thumbs up. All right, see, everyone else in the Zoom room says yes, go ahead. Go on then. What are you thinking, Emily?
So obviously I'm going to talk about what I believe it is to be a police officer within Northamptonshire and kind of put myself in the position of what I think the role it is. So then I'll talk about the Chief Constable, about what kind of he's brought to the force, why I think he's a good leader in the force, the policing priorities and what they are, a bit of an insight into that. And then I'm going to talk about the Code of Ethics and the National Decision Making Model. We've got an FP25, which is like the future vision of the force. my expectations of the role, what I've done to prepare for the role, and what I feel like I can give back to the force. So that's what I kind of want to summarise in then 5 minutes, and then kind of give a conclusion to round it up.
All right, that's a lot.
Do you think? I
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing a lot, and I feel like it might be a bit more than 5 minutes.
That's more than 5 minutes. I could talk about the priorities just for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I could talk about the code of ethics or the NDM for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Expectations, what you've done to prepare. All of those are 5-minute answers.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really answer the question, which is about what's the role of a PC in no offense. What sort of things do you think you'd be doing? What is your role within the community? I'd focus more on that.
Okay, cool.
Start off with a little bit with about the direction that the chief constable's given, the priority, and how this would lead. This is how I'd manage certain scenarios, because I believe in my role as a police officer, especially as a response officer, you have to put yourself in those shoes. I believe the sort of incidents I'll be dealing with predominantly will be, and this is according to the code of ethics, the expectations of the chief, but ultimately the expectations of the community. This is how I'd go about dealing with those things. And I'd talk about your values, and not just rattling off values from the code of ethics or CVF, but what's true to you, Emily? If I could ask you now, what one value would other people describe you as holding? The one thing that you'd die for, what would it be?
Like doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing.
Yeah, treating everyone individually to their needs.
Okay, well, that's that. Now you're going into something else. Doing the right thing, one thing, doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So I'd talk about some of the challenges that you might have, and some of the difficult decisions you might have to make, and how you would think, how you'd see yourself thinking those through, so that you'd be doing the right thing by the community, doing the right thing by the oath you swear to the Queen, doing the right thing to the, bear with me one moment, bear with me. Just dig something out. Where is it? There it is. Don't anyone say, oh, that's Steph, that is. They give me permission to take my old uniform with me. Just in case anyone says, was he allowed to take that with? Yeah, of course he was. There's my old inspector's cap. But look what you got right at the very front. What's at the front of that, Emily?
The crest.
The crest. Whose crest is that?
The
Who
Queen.
are you representing? The Queen. Your oath of office is to the Queen. When you put that cap on every day, you are a representation. You're representing Her Majesty the Queen. Whether you're a loyalist or not, I'm not much of a loyalist, but that's my oath of office.
Yeah.
And every day I represent Her Majesty, not anymore, but every day I did. Needs a bit of a dust, actually, that does this. So, in my role, there's something there about your place in society as well. It's up to you how you want to present it. There's no right or wrong for this question.
Yeah, within it, I was going to say, because in the expectations of the role, I was going to talk about like what jobs I feel like I'll be going to, and I know this because of what I've done is kind of like linked into what I've done to prepare for the role. So I've done observations in custody, so I've seen people that have police officers bringing in criminals that have committed these offences. I work in mental health. I've seen that I work collaboratively with police officers to deal with people, vulnerable people with mental health problems. And within the 4 priorities, these are what the public is, what the public have asked the police to be focusing on. And so I know that these are jobs that are probably going to be quite prolific in the area that I'm going to be joining.
Right. And if that what we've just said there would be, I'd love to hear about that and more, but what you just said there is probably about 45 seconds of your 5-minute answer. Can you see how you're not going to be able to squeeze it all in?
Yeah.
So have a little practice tonight,
Okay.
because my guess is that you've not practiced this nearly as much as you should be doing. Stand up.
I didn't get a lot of time to prepare for it, to be honest. They've done it really, really quickly. So I'm just struggling a bit.
Okay. I'd focus more on the role. You know, everything else you talked to me about before. If I said to my daughter, go and find out about Northants Police, she's 13, within half an hour she'd be able to tell me who the chief constable is, what he's been saying recently, what the priorities are. FP25, she'd tell me about that. She'd tell me about a lot of what you've just talked about, but it wouldn't actually tell me anything about her, and it wouldn't tell me anything about you, whereas you talking about, based on your research and what you've worked out so far, these are sort of incidents I'd be dealing with. These are the sort of skills I'd bring into it. This is what I think would be challenging. More about right down at ground level, and I'd perhaps bring in things like, you know, and I'm reminded of what Nick Adderley said just last week about something. Chief Constable Nick Adderley. Don't just say Nick, my friend Nick. But I would focus more on the role side, because this is their opportunity to find out something about you. And bear in mind, this is just my guidance and counsel, by the way. You do whatever you think is best. But you know, they want to find out about you, what makes you tick. So certainly bring in some of those other things, but don't make them the bulk of your answer. You've only got 5 minutes and it'll fly by.
Okay, cool.
All right, Emily. How's that for you?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Awesome. I think Emily, were you on the interview webinar the other night? Is that yourself?
I don't think so. No.
No. All right. There's an Emily on the interview webinar the other night. I don't know if it's the same one as you.
I did watch it back though, the interview webinar. No.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. There you go. You were on it after. Yeah. See, I can predict who was actually going to be on it later on watching the rerun. Other Emma Wallace. Last question, if you don't mind, because I did say an hour, and this could go on for 2, couldn't it? Go on, Emma.
Okay, so I've applied via the degree holder direct entry to detective route, and my online assessment window is open now. I've got until Monday to do the assessment, and I've been doing lots of sort of reading on the values and competencies and watching your YouTube videos and other ones, and
Go on.
But it is the competency interview section that is really like a mental stumbling block for me, and my mind just goes completely blank, even not in a kind of live situation, when I'm just trying with a notepad and pen in front of me thinking, right, I'll write down some examples that I could use for these types of questions. My mind just goes completely blank and I can't think of any real life examples. And my wife is a HR manager, and she has tried to coach me in answering these types of questions before, and I go to the interview and my mind just goes blank. And now I'm thinking to myself, I've got until Monday to log on and do the assessment, and I'm just not sure how I'm going to do it.
All right. Emma, do you mind sharing what it is you do in your life? What is it you do? What's your thing?
I'm a librarian.
A librarian?
Yeah.
And what things do you do outside of being a librarian?
I have written books. I've written fiction books and activity books, and not a whole lot else, which I know is not what you want to hear.
No, there will be a whole lot more else. So have you belonged to any other organisations or any groups or associations?
I am part of some independent author groups, and have I done anything else? See, my mind's just gone blank again. This is what happens.
Right. So, tell me you've had to change your communication style. My guess is a librarian, someone's come in and they've really struggled to explain what it is they're looking for. And by doing.
Yes, the book was read, but I can't tell you anything else about it now. Find it for me.
Something more complex than that. There'll have
Yeah.
been a time, if you cast your mind back, someone who was really struggling with something, or they perhaps needed some information about some local services or something like that, and for some reason they couldn't quite get their message over, and you perhaps took them to one side and you asked them certain types of questions, and you listened carefully to what they had to say, and eventually through a lot of hard work and you really changing how you approached your communication, you eventually managed to find out what it was they were looking for and provide them, give them guidance to that. Have you done that in the past?
Yes, and I would probably say for an example like that, I might use an example of somebody who needed to do something on the computer but didn't understand sort of the terminology that we were using to.
Awesome, that's nailed. Value transparency, which is all about difficult decisions. A time when you've come home from work or come home from a meeting, association meeting, or whatever it might be, and you've said to your wife or other loved ones or friends, do you know, I've got no idea what I'm going to do. I've no idea. And I don't even know where to start with this one. Has there been a time when you've said something like that?
All the time.
Right.
Just
Those are
like
the
life
times-
in general, all the time.
Yeah, those are the times when you seek advice and guidance of other people, you look up something on Google, you ask questions of other people who might have been through something similar in the past. And by doing that, it makes your difficult decision an easier one to make.
Okay.
That's all the value of transparency is. We take ownership. Has there been a time when you've taken responsibility for a task or a problem where you've had to work with other people to do so? Yeah, great. You better answer that one. A time when you've had to adapt to change, or support other people through change, or adapt to something new.
Yeah, so yeah, when they changed the computer system at work, and yeah,
it'd be really, really awesome if one of your colleagues struggled with it and you were the role model that helped them.
Yes, and she did, and yes, I did have to do.
Awesome. Tell me about a time when you've done the right thing, even when a different option would have been easier.
Oh, yeah, you see, that's the sort of thing where my mind just goes completely blank.
All right, think about a time when you might have had to speak to someone. This isn't about someone who might have been racist or sexist or homophobic. It might have just been a time when you just had to speak to someone because they were taking shortcuts at work, they weren't following a process or a policy, and it's not about challenging them as in a big noisy, you can't do that. It's about challenging them to say, were you aware that this policy is actually meant to be for, or one of the things that I've noticed you doing isn't actually according to what we should be doing. And there's a bit of resistance from them. Even better if there was a lot of resistance from them. And you help them through that resistance by asking them good questions and pointing things out and giving them well, I'd like you to imagine what would happen if, stuff like that. Has there been a situation like that?
I think one of the problems that I have is when I get into that sort of scenario, the example that I always want to use is where it's been a conflict with one of my managers, and we have a bit of a problem, me and other colleagues have a problem where he's not always the best person at adhering to sort of data protection and GDPR, and we find that he's a bit of a gossip, and we're always very aware that you have to be careful what you say to him, because he will talk to you about things that colleagues have said, and you kind of think to yourself, should you be talking to me about that? Aren't you now breaking data protection? But when I've used that as an example in interviews, the feedback I've got has been that I've used a negative example, and that I've then kind of brought a negative tone to the interview. And I'm not really sure how to get away from that when giving something like that as an example.
All right. I'm not quite sure where they're coming from there, because
Neither am I.
You're challenging someone's behaviour that's not appropriate. So that's not that it's negative, but if it's not appropriate, it needs dealing with, it needs confronting and challenging.
Mm.
So if you've talked to him about that behavior, then you've got a ready-made answer on a silver platter.
Yes.
Right.
Well, yeah, and obviously that's what I think, because that's the example I've given.
No,
but
that'll work. That will work for the online assessment centre.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'm looking at the time as well, and I'm thinking, do you know, I'd love to be able to work through all of these with you, Emma. And I'm not going to, otherwise it becomes like one-to-one coaching.
exactly. And my issue is that my online assessment is now. So
yeah. Right. Okay. This is what I'm going to do for you. You don't have to do this. You don't. It's completely up to you. But I'd like to help you here as much as I can. I'm running a course at the moment, course 30, for the online assessment centre. We did the introductory webinar last night. On Friday, we're doing stage 2 interview practice.
okay.
On Friday evening between 6 and 8. There's recordings made of all of these, because you've got to get everything done by Monday. The stage 3 ones that my friend iPhone was talking about, he's attending, who earlier, he's gone now. He's joining the stage 3 webinars next week, which are next Tuesday and Wednesday. You can't attend those. So, but I can give you access to previous webinars for the stage 3s. But what you really need is guidance on the stage 2.
Mm.
So I want to do what I can to try and help you here. So if you want to sign up for that, I will reduce the cost for you, because you've spent to thank you for joining me this evening as well. I can knock a big chunk of money off that for you.
I really appreciate that.
I want to help you and get you. Honestly, Friday night, even after a half an hour of being there on Friday evening, if you think, gosh, this is rubbish, just let me know and I'll refund it. I'll refund a whole lot for you, because I know you're going to join us on Friday, the group, and you're going to get the opportunity to practice, and you're going to go, my goodness, I'm so pleased I stayed for this. So just in case you're thinking, well, money's tight and all the rest of it, but if you want to go ahead with that, it's normally 159. If you go to the website, it's £159 for the online course and the webinars. But I don't know. Since you've missed the introductory webinar as well, £89 for yourself. I'd just give you the refund back onto your card if you wanted to go ahead with it. And I can give you some access to webinars, previous webinars for the stage 3 as well, some recordings, so you can binge out on those as well.
Can you send me a message with a link?
Actually, I think I can send a message now. So let me just hang on a second. Where's my bear with me a second, folks. Oh, there it is. It's hiding in one of my windows. Hang on. Oh, where would I put it? Do you know I'm rubbish at IT? Hang on a second, Emma, and everyone else. Actually, if anyone else wants to access as well, just drop me a line, and because you've been here tonight on this, I can do something. Oh, I can't find it. Let me just, right, bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to type in there.
Oh, but then also another thing that we've covered this evening about the being off mental health meds for a year, which I did not know anything about. So does that preclude me from actually passing the assessment? No.
What will happen? So I'm just going to put the link in here to the. Oh, I can't do cut and paste. Oh, there it is. There's it. Honestly, I really do. I've just put the link into the website. It's so into the chat function. They're going to say to you, apply anyway, because we won't be able to judge. We won't be able to work out whether you could go through or not until the medical, and the medical doesn't happen until the end
Okay.
And it depends on the force. Some, like I said before, some forces are really accommodating, some aren't.
Okay.
So you know, it really is roll the dice, roll the dice. And the recruitment people will just say apply, apply, apply. And then, you know, you'll get to the end of it and they'll say, oh, we'll have to defer you for a year. Or they may say, come on board. I don't know. You won't know until you get to medical, because they always say, we'll assess everyone's medical situation on an individual basis.
Yeah. So if at the point of the medical, they say it's a no, we'd have to defer you for a year. I can say categorically, I can't just come off my meds because, like, I can't.
No, well, it depends. It depends, you know, and this isn't the forum for talking about your individual situation. But I gave you the example before about an officer who, with the support of their doctor, got in whilst they were currently on meds because of the situation they were in and the doctor's diagnosis of where it's going.
Yeah.
No one can predict the future, but that's where I'd go with it. You don't know until the medical and the medical's at the end. And that's just the way it's always been and probably always will be. And people often get disappointed at the end of the recruitment journey because they find sometimes it's a medical condition, which is an absolute no. And if they just looked at the documentation to start with, they would have worked out that I could have saved myself a whole year worth of pain here by just working out right at the beginning that there's no way I'll ever be a police officer. Same with qualifications as well. People get to the end of the process and discover they've not got a maths GCSE and they've got to have one. Or as one of my clients a few years ago, she's 55 when she applied. She just wanted to be a police officer for 4 years until she had to retire at 60. She got right to the end of the process and they went, oh, you've not got level 3 qualifications. And she said, well, when I left school, everyone left at 16 after their O levels. And I just went into work and that's all I've done. I've had businesses, I've worked for charities, I've done all sorts of things. Does that not count? And they went, no. And then they said, well, what about being a PCSO? And she went, oh, right, okay, yeah, that right, anything. And they said, well, yeah, but you've got to start all over again right at the beginning of the recruitment process. And she was furious because she put down on the application form quite clearly, these are the O levels I've got. Those are the things that happen before GCSEs, everyone. And they didn't know, they didn't clock it. And what they said was, we don't check qualifications until the end of the process. She's now a PCSO and she's really happy, but she didn't have to jump through some hoops that were completely unnecessary. So just bear in mind that they're not always your friend in recruitment, but they don't check all of those things until the end. So it's always a bit of a gamble. Anyway, Emma, if you want to go ahead with that offer there, just let me know, just jump on it tonight and I'll refund it and I'll invite you to the course 30 stage 2 interview interactive practice webinar on Friday evening. It'd be awesome. And like I said, if after half an hour you're thinking it's not for me, just let me know. I'll refund it. But it doesn't matter. I know you'll want to stay. It'd be great.
Thank you.
Right, folks, I'm gonna have to go. I did say this would be an hour. If you do have any questions, just drop me a line. You can always message me through the Facebook group. Awesome to have you all on board tonight. How was it? How was that question? How was that workshop? So good? Great stuff. Great. Let's do more of them. I think we'll do one of those a week. I shall catch up with you at next week's, or for those of you who that was sufficient. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said before, right at the very beginning, it was recorded. The recording will go out there to help other people, to support other people. But I don't think there's anything controversial tonight, was there? There's anything controversial? No. We're all authentic people. Awesome stuff. Catch you all soon, folks. Bye-bye for now. Look after each other.